Hey, welcome back to Life on the Wrist. Hope you're doing well. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Hope everyone has had a good start to their week. We're officially halfway, so we're very, very close to the weekend. So just keep plugging away, and the weekend will be upon us very, very soon. Today, I thought we would discuss this article that was released last week by the New York Times, and it basically delved into the fact that safety deposit box at banks may not be as safe as we really think they are. It talks about a bunch of stories about people who have lost things that they've put into those safety deposit boxes, and I've ended up getting a bunch of text messages and calls from people asking me what I thought about the article and where one should keep their watch collections, being that we really do love this hobby and we love watches, but now where we think is safe may not be all that safe. So I thought I would just kind of summarize the article for you guys, give you some of the stories that they talk about. I'll be sure to put a link in the description to the article so that you can read the entire thing, and that way I'm not missing anything. So definitely check that article out. I'll put it in the description, as I said. And while you're in the description, the like button is pretty close, so if you wouldn't mind hitting that for us, that would be greatly appreciated too. So like I said, the article was released by the New York Times, and it basically discussed about how storing valuables in a bank safety deposit box may not be as safe as we really think they are. There are a few stories that were mentioned in the article, and I thought I would just kind of talk about those. So the first story was about someone who wasn't paying their fees. So the fees for having that safety deposit box inside of that bank, and so the bank decided to evict their box from being stored there. But they ended up taking the wrong person's box. Now, the person who owned the box that was taken out ended up going back to that bank and asking to see the box, and they said it wasn't there. So they had to get it back. They had to get it back from where they had shipped it off to store it. And this person had around $10 million worth of items in this box. And when the box was shipped back to the owner, being that he wasn't the one who actually was evicted, when the box was shipped back to him, he found that some stuff was actually missing. He doesn't know, how the stuff was missing. As someone stole it. It's very, very ambiguous. It also talks about how sometimes, it's not always the bank's fault. Sometimes you as within your agreement with the bank, you give access to some family members who may end up going and taking things out of the box that you are unaware of, or perhaps you just forget that you took some stuff out of the box and it's lying somewhere else. But then again, having $10 million in a safety deposit box and having some stuff gone, it really breaks the trust that person probably has with that bank. So that was a really bad story that happened. Another one was there was a lawsuit in LA where a woman sued Bank of America because some of the stuff from her safety deposit box were missing. She ended up getting a settlement of about $4.5 million. The reason why they spoke about this story was because of the language inside of the contracts that these types of companies have. So obviously, Bank of America went back to courts and said, we have language in our leasing agreements that says that the renters assumes all risk for keeping these items in this box. There is also language in that agreement that says that the liability that Bank of America has doesn't exceed 10 times the annual rent that they're paying for that safety deposit box. So the initial amount that woman was going to get was $4.5 million. It ended up being reduced by the courts to $150,000. Just because of the language within the contracts. So I think the moral of that story is definitely read the contract that you have with your bank if you are storing watches in safety deposit boxes, because if that's the case and they are only assuming that amount of risk and will only cover losses of 10 times what your annual rent is, perhaps it's the wrong type of bank or wrong agreement that you probably don't want to have signed. It's crazy that they quoted some of the things that the lawyers for Bank of America were saying. They were saying, why would you put so many valuables in a box? I feel like that's the point of a safety deposit box at a bank. Not the best face of a bank, especially when you think of a bank as a place where you'll keep valuables and they're safe there. I feel like that's the whole point of a bank. And then when a banker's lawyer says, why are you putting so many valuables in a safety deposit box? I mean, that's your point, that's your job. That's why I decided to come to you to store my valuables. Really, really stupid. I mean, it's crazy to read this article because you find out that this is not just a one-time thing. Apparently 33,000 boxes are harmed by theft and disaster every single year, which is an absurd amount, especially when you think about 33,000 people probably keeping a lot of valuables in those safety deposit boxes, which means that's a lot of money that people are losing just because of the way in which the safety deposit box world is kind of set up. I think the biggest story that had an impact on me was definitely about a watch collector who had 5 watches returned to him, and they weren't even his watches. Apparently they were the wrong dial colors, they were the wrong designs, and to think, and this was at a Wells Fargo branch, and to think that, you know, that this is kind of a twofold problem, right? So he had 5 watches returned that weren't his. So first of all, where are his watches? Where are the watches that actually belong to him that he entrusted the bank to keep safe? So that's the first thing. But second thing is, whose watches are these? Whose watches have I somehow come across and are now apparently, according to the bank, mine? I'm gonna have to try and find that person to give the watches to them. So that it just throws a wrench into just about every aspect of your life, right? Because then you've lost your valuables, and now you have to figure out who the hell these watches belong to, so you can somehow get the watches to that person. I'm assuming the bank probably helped him out with that, but at the same time, I mean, again, the purpose of a safety deposit box at a bank is to store your valuables and feel safe in the fact that it's being protected by this bank branch. But the fact that, you know, this guy got 5 watches that weren't his, it's really, really bad. Apparently, some of the watches that he had included a Tiffany moon phase watch, as well as a Breguet engraved with a coat of arms of the Duke of New Orleans. That's, I mean, those are just in general a crazy amount of money in watches. There was also, I think the biggest one that went missing for him was this 19th century pocket watch. Apparently had pearls and rubies on the dial, and it had this pop-up bird. It's kind of nicknamed the singing bird watch. Bird watches, extremely popular, and apparently the last time a watch like this sold at auction, it went for $773,000 and that was in 1999. So just let that sink in for a little bit. That was 20 years ago. It sold for $773,000. Imagine in today's auction world what that would be going for. And that was one of the watches that he ended up losing because of that. And I'm assuming there was probably language in the, I didn't read this in the article, but I'm assuming there was probably language in this person's agreement with the bank that said that they probably don't cover the liability of that watch, which is, I mean, mind-boggling to me. So again, like 20 years ago, it sold for $773,000. That watch would easily go for more than, easily $1 million. You could probably, you know, kind of go up from there. It's extremely disheartening that someone can lose watches like this so easily, especially when you're entrusting a bank to keep them safe. So the main question that kind of stems from this whole discussion is, where should I keep my watches now? Now that I know that banks are not safe, perhaps my agreement with the bank is not one that's protecting me to the fullest extent that it can, especially with the amount of trust that I'm entrusting them with, amount of money that I'm entrusting them with, within my collection of watches or coins or whatever you end up storing there. So, I mean, to be honest, you're kind of at a loss, right? People think that safety deposit boxes are the perfect place to keep your watch collection. You don't want to keep them at your house because they can easily be stolen if your house is broken into. If you have a safe in your house, it might be a little bit better, but at the same time, you know, you're going to want to get one of those massive safes that are super heavy and are not easily broken into or removed. So, you know, your house really isn't the most practical of choices. So I think the best way to kind of approach this problem is make sure that the agreement that you're signing with the bank has the correct type of language to protect your collection to the fullest extent that it possibly can. Because if it doesn't, you're just at a loss. I think it's also important to check on your safety deposit box as regularly as possible to make sure that everything is there, and you don't find out, you know, three years later when you check that box, that some stuff is missing. And honestly, trying to find a bank that you trust is probably the best avenue to go by. Sometimes, you know, these things kind of throw a wrench in this whole collecting space, because then you don't really know if you want to collect watches, if you want to continue to buy watches. I'm not going to say it's going to have a massive impact on collecting watches. I will say that people will probably be skeptical about you know, having so much money in watches. Perhaps it's a little bit safer just to go with some other type of asset. You just have to be very, very careful with where you end up storing your watches. I'll tell you, the article definitely threw a wrench in my kind of collector sphere of friends who collect watches, and I'm glad that New York Times reported on it, because it's bringing this issue to light so that we can all be aware of it, and hopefully banks will try and change the way in which they approach this problem, and collectors will be a little bit more skeptical and a little bit more analytical with the where where they will be storing their watches. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Just a quick summary on that article. Like I said, I will put a link in the description to that article so you can check it out. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this article. I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's definitely gets your mind kind of flowing, and you question watch collecting a little bit more. Has this ever happened to anyone of you? Would love to hear about that. And if you haven't already, and I said in the beginning of the video, but if you wouldn't mind liking this video, it'd be greatly appreciated. It does help out the YouTube algorithm, so we can get a lot more you know, friends of the watch community to see our videos and enjoy discussing watches with us. So with that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.